Hello friends, it's GooberTroy here. It's been a great day today with the new Armored Core 6 gameplay preview. In addition, we've seen the embargoes drop, so a lot of bigger creators have been letting out videos with a little bit more details. So it's just been a lot of information coming at us pretty quickly. I've taken some time to watch several of those videos at this point to try to have the best understanding going into this breakdown. But before we get into the actual breakdown, I want to mention that I will be giving away a free standard edition copy of Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. To enter, you must be subscribed to the channel as well as follow the link in the description to answer a couple questions. So with that out of the way, let's get into the actual video content. So right at the start here, we're kind of met with the same introductory sequence as the gameplay trailer, where we're just seeing ourselves, Augmented Human 621, kind of land on Rubicon for the first time. So it sounds like we land away from our actual target, so we're having to work our way closer to the designated battlegrounds. So at the start, we're just kind of assuming learning the controls at that point, so it's kind of the tutorial section. And here we kind of get the first look at the HUD. Um, it's pretty accurate and spot on to what Vaddy was kind of explaining. So good on him for trying to recreate that in Photoshop to have it as accurate as possible. There are some extra details that we'll kind of go over in this next section. But for now, this is just a really solid first look at the UI. I think this is much cleaner than what we had to deal with in Armored Core 5, but I think that, maybe that's just me. I thought Armored Core 5 was just a little too cluttered, just a little bit too much going on with the two modes between scan mode and combat mode, but I think this looks really nice and really clean. As for the environments, it looks really pretty. We have a bunch of different terrains from mountainous. We have these compounds up in the sky, which that's where we're at right now. So there's just a lot of verticality. You can see this mission or this compound over here, which I think we end up visiting. It's just a really nice mixture of different terrains, and we'll even see some like foresty areas, which I I think we have seen those in previous Armored Cores, and they're usually some of the coolest areas in my opinion. So I'm happy to see more, I guess, more nature and less industrialization around. So next we're kind of just launching ourselves to get closer to the actual mission here by going up on this catapult. And this catapult looks identical. It's or not, maybe not identical. It's very reminiscent of the opening sequence of Armored Core 4 Answer, where White Glint is kind of launching himself into a mission. So here we're going to encounter our first couple of enemies, and this is where I want to break a few things down, right? The first is going into our actual HUD here. So this giant reticle is kind of what you're controlling with the right stick. This will soft. There's two different lock-ons between soft and hard lock-on. I'm not going to go into too much details of those, but you kind of aim at your targets with this reticle here, and there's a few details around it. Like down here, you see a gray bar. This and there's another gray bar over here. These are indicative of your weapons, and when they start to glow red, it means that they're recharging or need to be reloaded. The reticles up here, this gray bar is the enemy that you're locked onto. It's their health. And this other bar is their stagger bar. So once this stagger bar fills up, they will briefly be staggered and unable to move, and you'll do bonus damage to those targets. And then also, there seems to be a bit of a stealth mechanic implemented in Armored Core 6. So you can see up here, it says that the enemy is unaware. I'm not sure if that's going to have some implications for stealth going into these missions. It would be really cool if radar jammers would have a little bit more of an impact going into missions. I'm not sure there's going to be missions where stealth is very important. Like you in order to S rank, you have to avoid enemy contact until you get to like a mini boss or something like that. That definitely could happen. But then moving into some of the other details here, we have in the bottom left, we have our AP. That's our health points. And then we also have our repair kits. So there's 3 available at the start of a mission. We also have the option to scan. That's just looking through objects to see if there's enemies hiding behind them. And there's no limit to using it. It's just got a cooldown. And then we also have expansion units, which this mech doesn't have any equipped there. And then below all of that, so in this area here, we have our own stagger bar and we have our energy. So as you use energy, this gray bar here will start to deplete. And then as we are closer and closer to being staggered, this bar here will grow from the middle, similar to how it works in Sekiro. And then just a couple extra details. So here we have boost on. The boost in this game is a toggle. If you don't have boost enabled, you'll just simply walk around. But if you have boost enabled, then you're actually like kind of skating around, and that's going to be your primary way of moving in Armored Core 6. And then in the bottom right corner, we have our weapon units. LB and RB are left back and right back. And then LA and RA are going to be left arm and right arm. And it just kind of shows your ammo capacity for those. One other thing I wanted to mention is that on the HUD, there's this reticle here. It says 4. So in this case, we are using a rocket launcher that fires 4 rockets. So this indicator means that if we were to fire the rockets, 4 of them would hit this target. And then finally, there is a speedometer on the left hand, and I think this is our altitude on the right. And then finally, there is a compass that shows enemies on the map. So here we're just going to strafe back and forth and quickly dispatch these smaller enemies, and then we're going to move on to this next area. So here it says that our mission objective is to obtain a mercenary license, and then Walter in his previous dialogue here, let me go back. In Walter's previous dialogue, he said that I'm picking up signals from a C-Rex, so these must be fallen mercenaries, and we're just going to go and, I guess, take a license. That's kind of how I interpret that. And yeah, we're just entering this compound here.
One of the core abilities at your disposal, used for both traversal and combat.
Let me go back slightly. So here we're going to start with an assault boost to quickly traverse into the compound. This way of boosting quickly consumes our total energy, but this is by far our fastest method of traveling. So this is used both offensively, defensively to dodge missiles and stuff like that. I think assault boosting is going to be very important to movement in Armored Core 6. It's going to really help with our offense and defense to dodge missiles and stuff like that. So again, these mechs are unaware that we're standing here. So realistically, we probably could sneak behind them and just carry on with the mission. That would also probably save us some money at the end screen because we don't have to worry about taking damage or ammunition costs and stuff like that.
Did you hear anything about what the corps are up to?
Yeah, they'll be coming soon. Got us on the run.
What if we also get a little bit of lore and storylines from these dialogues between the unaware soldiers?
Take full advantage of your AC's mobility to freely navigate the environment.
So one thing about Armored Core 6 is that um, we're able to travel vertically a little bit easier than last games. So like Armored Core 5 and Verdict Day had a little bit more of a static, grounded gameplay. But this is like we're actually able to more easily fly up and down, as you can see here. And then here you can see that our objective is this pile of, well, I assume it's the body of a former mech, an AC, and we're just trying to take the license from that. But first, we have to clear out the enemies that are surrounding them. Next, we're entering the what seems to be the first boss of the game. It's going to be this giant attack helicopter. So we are approaching what seems to be our final objective, and this is where the boss spawns. And there's a few changes here. The first is that while fighting a boss, their health bar, it also shows at the top. Um, let's get a little bit of a better view there. The health of the boss will show at the top here, along with their stagger bar, so you don't always have to just rely on your reticle to kind of determine that. You have a little bit extra details with this. The other thing, though, is there's an additional indicator here on the boss where it says hit and it says 68. So we're doing 68 points of damage. And I assume hit means that we're doing the full damage of our weapon attack. And there's also another status. I'm not sure if it happens in this fight with the helicopter, but it's called ricochet. And I assume that means that we're only doing a fraction of the actual damage to the boss. So just things to consider, that there's different things that happen in combat. I think ricochet, it happens when you're too far away from an enemy, and a direct hit is kind of when you're in your effective combat range. So it kind of forces you, depending on what weapon type you're using, to be at certain distances. You can't really be super far away from a boss, otherwise their defense is just going to cause your attacks to ricochet and you're not going to be doing a lot of damage. So I just wanted to fast forward really quick to the other boss in this gameplay trailer to show the ricochet. At this point, we're standing kind of far away from this boss, and the ricochet is showing that it's only doing 11 points of damage to the boss from this distance. But as we approach, you start to see that it changes to hit. Sorry, this is really bright. I'm trying to get. So it says we're doing 222 points of damage, and it's a hit. So if you're ricocheting, it means that you probably have to get a little bit closer to the boss so your weapons are more effective. The other thing I wanted to mention about bosses, though, is they feel. So people are saying that like this game feels, or it seemed more Souls-like than other Armored Cores, but I think the only thing that really seems Souls-like from what I've seen in this gameplay trailer is the bosses. Like there are actual attacks that you have to dodge. Like there's horizontal attacks that have to be dodged. So if I go back to the second boss, yeah. So if I go back to the second boss here, he's doing more like horizontal attacks and stuff like that you have to be aware of. You have to dodge like this flamethrower sweep. He also does a like ground, like that attack right there. Like he like kind of looks like he's gonna fire at the ground, and in this case, it looks like we're supposed to be in the air to dodge this attack. So boss fights feel a lot more vertical. You have to be willing to use, your Z-axis. So I don't know, it's really cool. All right, so in this next section, we have the garage, which is a big part of what I was hoping to see in this video, and might be where the bulk of this video is going to kind of be spent. So we're at the home page when you first enter the garage here, and there's just a couple things to cover here and that I've noticed. But first, we have this COAM. This is going to be the main currency that we use to spend to buy parts for our mechs, and also what we receive during our missions. There's this other section, this other currency, OST chips. These are earned from the arena, and these can be used on different enhancements for our AC. These will typically be things like assault armor, which is used to I think it's a defensive and offensive applications where if used defensively, you can use it to block missiles that are coming in, and if used offensively, it is used to stagger enemies. So that's just an example of things that you can buy with these OST chips. And I think you can only equip one, so I could be wrong on that, but we'll see in the future, I guess. So the next thing is the mercenary license. This is going to be our pilot name, the emblem that you want to use. And then there are two rankings here. The first is the arena rank, which is obviously where you're placed within the arena. The other is hunter class, and I'm not sure what this actually means. There's no indicator here like there is for arena ranking. I wonder if hunter class is kind of indicative of the types of story missions that we can go on. Like maybe we can go on 5-star missions if we're hunter class, like rank 5 or something like that. I have no idea. It would be interesting though if they had some sort of bounty system in the future where we could go on like co-op missions to hunt down like rogue pilots or something like that. I think that could be a really cool mode and a way to introduce co-op without like affecting the story mission too much. But that's total speculation. I have no idea what hunter class actually means. Moving on though, we have AC design. This is going to be where we can assemble our mech, and in addition, we can customize the look of our mech by painting it or adding decals and stuff like that. Part shop is kind of what it sounds like. This is where you can buy the parts that go onto your mech, and it'll enter your AC design customization menu. OS tuning, I think this might be the store where you maybe buy your OS chips, like use your OS chips to buy things. I don't actually know though, because that could also be like a part of the part shop. They didn't really show the part shop options in this menu. Um, so OS tuning is kind of speculation at this point. Arena is where you probably go to enter the actual arena and increase your arena rank. It could also be where you go to do PvP. And Nest is either also PvP or it's a way to just kind of communicate with the story, like receive messages from NPCs and stuff like that. And Sortie is where you go to set out on missions. Next, we're going to get into the actual garage and all the parts that we have been shown in this gameplay trailer. So this is the assembly. This is where we actually put all of the components together. And you can see here, this is kind of broken down into 4 different categories. We have units at the top, we have frame in the middle, then we have inner and expansion. So units are going to be our weapons or our arsenal, and we have these broken down into a right and left arm unit and a right and left back units. The frame is kind of making up the skeleton of our mech. We have the head, core, arms, and legs, and then inner is kind of the guts, I guess, of the armored core. Here we have our boosters, our FCS to influence our lock-ons, and then we have generators, which kind of control how much energy we have. And then there's this final unit for expansion, and they don't show what this actually is at all. They don't show any examples. I'm not sure if this is kind of that where you equip what you buy with the OST chips. That's what I'm assuming, because I know you only get to equip one at a time. So I assume that gets selected here. And then if we bring our attention to the bottom right, we have the AC specs. These are kind of the, I guess, the 6 main categories that kind of make up our armored cores, depending on these units. So for starters, we have AP. This is like our health points. If this reaches 0, our mech is destroyed. Then we have defensive performance. This is going to mitigate some of the damage when we take a hit. And then we have what says attitude stability. I assume that's supposed to be altitude stability, but this is going to influence how many hits we can take before we're actually staggered. And then we have boost speed. This is going to, the heavier our mech is, the less boost speed we're going to have. And then on the other side, if we are a lightweight mech, we're going to have a higher boost speed. Current load is how much just everything that we have equipped literally weighs. Our leg units determine how much of a current equip load we can have. there is a little indicator kind of in the middle here with this arrow. That's how much we can currently load. If this bar goes above that line, we are exceeding our load limit and we just cannot function. We can't move. So we want to try to keep that lower. And again, like I said, leg types determine the leg types determine what our maximum current load is. So by changing our leg types, this indicator will slide either to the right or to the left depending on those legs. And then finally, we have current energy load. This is how much our mech is kind of using to actually function. This is all the energy that all the parts need to be properly utilized. And similarly to the current energy load also has an indicator here. This is determined by the generator and also the core in combination. The higher this indicator is, it means the higher energy consuming parts we can consume or equip, sorry. And if we go over this indicator in the middle and the bar turns red, that means that our mech is using too much energy for what we're producing and it won't function. Next, we're going to get into some weapons that we can equip. And it's not going to show all the categories, but it does show a few of them. The first weapon is a machine gun, and you can see at the bottom it has the part specs. So the attack power, this is going to determine how much damage we're actually doing when we directly hit a mech. The impact is going to be how much stagger damage we're doing to a mech. Total rounds is how much ammunition we're taking into a mission. And then weight and energy load are kind of they're just how much they influence your current load versus your current energy load. So like I said, all parts kind of have an influence on that weight and energy usage. All right, so the next weapon that we see is a burst machine gun. So based off of the part specs, it has it shows here 40 times 4. So I assume that means that we're gonna have this machine gun, this burst machine gun, fires in 4-round bursts. And then the next weapon we're going to see is a Gatling gun. This is oftentimes one of my favorites just because of bullet hell. It's usually pretty fun. It costs a lot at the end of missions though. But nothing else really to say about this. Gatling guns are usually very heavy, but again, they're very fun. And if you look closely, this is actually the Gatling gun that C-17 was using in his mission in the story trailer. So thought that was kind of interesting. And then the last weapon type that we'll see for the guns is a shotgun. This, just looking at it, has a much lower ammo capacity, but it has much higher impact damage and attack power. But of course, you have to be much closer proximity for it to be really effective. And then we're going to get into some melee weapons, which I think are a lot more interesting. This first one that we see is the explosive thrower. This is a weapon that we saw in the initial reveal trailer where this quad mech is throwing a bunch of explosives in an arc in front of him horizontally. But it also says here in the description that when you charge it, you actually fire the projectiles in a vertical spread instead of horizontal. And then my personal favorite weapon that we've seen in this trailer is the chainsaw. We know that this was mentioned from Ogura in some of his interviews, but this just looks it looks insane. It looks kind of like tank treads. But it also says, one thing I forgot to mention is that in the part spec, for melee weapons, there is this category for consecutive hits. So I assume that means how many times you can attack with this weapon before it needs to recharge. In addition, this weapon also has a charge attack where when you charge it up, it deploys blades on the chainsaw and then you can kind of push it into targets and it'll rapidly accumulate damage. So kind of like a chainsaw, kind of reminds you of Gears of War a little bit. But when you're not doing the charge attack, I wonder if it kind of functions more like a like a blunt weapon or something like that. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting that blades only deploy when you're charging it. But maybe you can't use this without it being charged in the first place. Another weapon that looks pretty interesting is this stun baton. This has, just comparing it to the other melee weapons we've seen, this has much lower attack power and impact, but it's much lighter weight and it has a higher energy load than some weapons. So looking at the description, It says repeated attacks induce a forced electrical discharge effect on afflicted craft. I'm not sure what that means. I assume that maybe if you, it's kind of like a status effect from like the Souls games. So by repeatedly attacking with this baton, you kind of build up a status ailment where once it reaches a certain threshold, you like stagger an enemy or something like that. But when you charge this weapon, it says that the exposed core extends. Um, or sorry, it says that you expose the core rod and thrust with it, and that just sounds so brutal. This weapon kind of looks sick. I assume you can kind of see where it extends at and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like they've given a lot of personality to some of these weapons just from looking at the stun baton and the chainsaw. But one last thing I wanted to mention about the stun baton is out of all the weapons that we see here, there's actually this fourth category in the parts spec, and I don't know what this icon means. The other ones don't have this, so like, let me rewind slightly. Too far. So like, if we look at all of these weapons so far, there's nothing here, right? But as soon as we get to the stun baton, it has this additional icon, which kind of makes me think that there are status ailments that can be of like afflicted by base like some certain weapons, and I think the stun baton is one of those weapons. But the last weapon, that melee weapon that is that's shown, is the laser dagger. This was kind of displayed in the gameplay trailer that we saw a while ago. This is just a fast weapon. It has 3 consecutive hits. It has more attack power and impact than the stun baton. But when this is charged, it just does a singular horizontal sweep attack, and it will do increased damage. Next, we're going to look at some of the back weapons that are available, and a lot of these are just launchers. So we have several missile launchers, and the difference between these are kind of how they're fired. Some of them are like forward firing missile launchers, while some of them are vertical. And just looking at this dual missile launcher, they will have different like tracking and stuff like that. So like again, the description of this dual missile launcher says that the missiles will launch in a pincer trajectory, kind of limiting options for opponents to move. So it's kind of cool to play around with some of these missile launchers to kind of find a method to trick opponents and kind of force them to like come to you and stuff like that. So again, the next one is a vertical launcher. This will fire missiles in like arc a little bit, and so they have better tracking over top of defenses. So it's harder for enemies to hide behind buildings and stuff like that. This next one is it's an active homing missile launcher. This is a I think this is a slow moving projectile, but it tracks enemies because it's slow moving. It tracks enemies better. The next one we have is a needle missile launcher. This says that it fires stakes at high velocity that bore through an enemy's armor. These are non-explosive, so they're more about just ballistics rather than explosive power. And then next, we're going to be looking at the left shoulder units or back units. And the first one that we see is the Pulse Buckler. This is a defensive shield that we see in a few different trailers. Looking at the part spec, it has different specs for damage mitigation, impact dampening, and deployment range. I assume damage mitigation is just how much each bullet is like mitigated whenever it blocks. Impact dampening is going to reduce how much stagger damage we're building up. And then deployment range, I am not sure what that means exactly. If I had to guess, I assume that's how much coverage it has when it's deployed. So how much we're actually being protected. Because if this is on the left back, maybe our right side is more exposed if you have a low deployment range, or maybe it's just the speed at which the deployment happens. Then we have another buckler, which is kind of doing the same thing. But this one is more focused on impact dampening than physical damage mitigation. And then we get a few laser cannons. These laser cannons, they have 2 different properties. So there's 2 laser cannons specifically. This first one is just a laser cannon that kind of emulates a rifle, and then this other cannon, this diffused laser cannon, it emulates more of a shotgun. And when you just tap them to fire, it kind of um, showcases those emulated like rifle versus shotgun. So if you tap it, this diffuse laser cannon is gonna shoot in a shotgun pattern, and the other one is gonna just fire a single round like a rifle. But both of them, when you charge them, it changes the properties. So the one that acts like a rifle, it just increases the damage. But this one, like the shotgun, when you charge it, it says that it concentrates the laser, producing an energy explosion. So it almost sounds like it becomes more like a grenade launcher when it's charged up. So I think that's really cool because it gives us more variety in how we want to approach combat. All right, next we're going to be getting into the frames. So starting with the head, we have just a few different options here. One thing you're going to notice is that in this part specs, there's just three categories. We have AP, which is again our health. We have altitude stability, which is going to be how quickly or how much stagger we can take before we're actually stunned. And then this last one is system recovery. I assume system recovery is how quickly our stagger, like if we do get staggered, how quickly we recover from that. And also if we've avoided attacks for a certain amount of time, how quickly the stagger drops in that case.
Core and internal parts for power management.
Next, we have the core. This is the torso of our mech. This is actually um, kind of an important piece. I mean, I guess all pieces are important, but the core dictates a lot. For example, it has the most AP out of all of the armor pieces or the frame pieces. So this will give you the biggest chunk of HP out of all of your armor pieces. The altitude stability is kind of standard across the all frame units. But the other thing, and this is very important, is the generator output adjustment. Um, this just acts as like a multiplier for your generator. So what you'll see here is as this adjuster kind of like if it's a higher adjustment, the current energy load, the indicator here is going to slide either right or left depending on whether the generator output is higher or lower. So basically, this interacts with our generators to further enhance them or hinder them a little bit depending on what frame piece we choose to use. So I'll just play this here, and you'll kind of notice that these values are going to slide, and this indicator here in the middle is also going to slide. Okay, so now we're into the arm pieces, and these I guess are also I guess all of the like I said, all of the parts are very important, but arms are they dictate how much armor you have, so how much AP you have, and they also dictate how heavy of weaponry you can equip in those arms. So arm load limit actually is a weight limit. How if you want to use like the heaviest arm weapons, you have to equip heavy arms to handle that weight. You can't equip lightweight arms and expect to be able to handle the heaviest artillery possible. There's kind of a balance between your arms and what arm units you're going to have. Firearm specialization. I am not entirely sure what this is. If I had to make an educated guess, I would think that it means it's kind of influencing how accurate our rifles are at a distance. Maybe it's influencing that ricochet versus hit indicator. So if a firearm specialization is high and we're using like a laser rifle from a distance, it's going to be harder to have those rounds ricochet. But again, I am not entirely sure what firearm specialization means. I'm just guessing.
Assembling an AC to fit your own playstyle.
And then finally, in this part of the garage, we're going to be seeing leg units. These legs are, like I said earlier, these determine what our load limit is actually going to be for our entire mech. So depending on what leg types you're going with, there are four different types. There's bipedal, there's reverse joint, there are quad legs, and there are tank treads. Tank treads traditionally have been the legs with the highest load limits. So if you want to use a So if you want to use a heavier loadout, you want to go tank treads. And that's just kind of what the importance of legs are. That's just an example. But yeah, legs are very important. And like I said before too, if your leg, if your load limit exceeds what your legs can handle, your mech just is not going to be able to function.
And strategy is crucial to success.
So here we're going to be getting into the mission briefing. This is probably going to happen before every like big story mission, I assume. This kind of just gives you a little bit of a heads up on what your objectives are going to be for the mission. It also gives you a little bit of story during these briefings, and this has been pretty common for other Armored Core games, but it's just really cool to see this coming back. So Walter, he kind of mentions this group, the Arquebus group. This is one of the mega corporations that is trying to get control of Coral, trying to get control of Rubicon. Um, these are people who are going to supply us with different weapon types and stuff like that. But as this, I'll let this debriefing play. But you're going to kind of notice that Arquebus does not seem like a great corporation to work with.
The mission will take place in the Bonadea dunes of Western Belius. Our Coral investigation there is being blocked by the Strider, a Rubicon Liberation Front mining ship.
So here he's mentioning Rubicon Liberation Front mining ship. Rubicon Liberation Front, I think, are essentially like natives from after the decimation of like the cataclysm that happened on Rubicon 50 years ago. I think this is like the civilization that has remained since that devastation, and they've made a life for themselves. But now that corporations are coming back and trying to take all the coral and like control of Rubicon, the Rubicon Liberation Front is fighting back, and they're kind of taking and repurposing different industrializations, like industrial tools to kind of fight back against these corporations.
Ship. You are to destroy it. The Strider is a mobile resource base that was extensively weaponized by the Liberation Front. Call it the crowning glory of their efforts to militarize into an anti-corporate force.
I don't know if you hear it, but the way he says anti-corporate force sounds very menacing. Um, you can just tell that this Arquebus corporation is very not pleased with this Rubicon Liberation Front and like the efforts that they've been making. So he's going to start to point out here that your objective is to destroy this giant laser, but it's actually protected, and to get access to it, you have to destroy these sub-generators in order to bring down the shield.
Your attack will focus on the Eye, a giant laser cannon connected directly to the main generator. It's protected by a shield, which is powered by auxiliary sub-generators. These should be your first targets. This concludes the briefing. Good luck.
So after the briefing, we hear Handler Walter kind of talking about a little self-promotion. This just kind of seems like he's just throwing us out there and having us do the promotion and doing, showing what we're capable of, instead of kind of Walter, I guess, showcasing us and kind of talking us up and stuff. He's basically saying, go out there and do your own thing, 621.
Smash the Strider, and Arquebus HQ will be sure to remember your name.
Main system activating combat mode.
So this is the first. This mission reminds me of destroying arms fortresses or arms forts from Armored Core 4 Answer. Specifically, this looks like approaching Motherwell. We're in this desert wasteland. About this mission, though, it's really cool how our vision is kind of obscured, but you can kind of see this looming shadow here in the distance, and that's our target. But it's just this ominous feeling of like scale, I guess. I really think that this mission, the start of it at least, is really cool.
Commence mission. First, get through all that dust and make contact with the Strider.
Here, We're up against an enormous weapon that eclipses our AC in size.
Unidentified agent. Must be one of the corporation's dogs. Activate the eye. Burn them away. Yes, sir. Coral, align with Rubicon. Align with Rubicon.
So here, this is another thing that feels like Mother Will is as you're approaching that eye that we're supposed to take out, you can see it just glowing through all this dust, but it's charging up this devastating laser that we're gonna have to dodge. And I assume if we get hit by it, it's gonna either be a one shot or force a mission restart because there might not be any recovering from it. So it's not really mentioned in the debriefing, but one of the other side objectives to, I guess, kind of trigger some of the later mission is that we had to destroy the leg of the Strider in order to get it to stop moving. I think that is what's going to kind of enable us to target the sub generators. But I would be interested to see what happens if like you just ignored the legs. Like, is that actually possible? I don't know.
Six to one. You need to take out one of its legs to bring it to a halt. Confirmed. Strider leg compromised. It's going down. The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
So you see this like just giant section of the Strider falling apart, but you also see that a large chunk of health actually got depleted when you destroyed those legs and they fell apart like that.
Alright, now we've got a foothold to get on the deck. Grab on and get to work on the sub-generators.
So here we're just kind of flying through and destroying a bunch of like small turrets and stuff like that so that we can approach the generators safely and destroy them. So at the end here, it shows all four of our targets. I think that this top one is the eye that we're supposed to be destroying. That's the primary objective. But then there are three targets. So there's one on the right here at the bottom and on the left. Those are what I assume to be the sub generators that we have to destroy first. So it's just a nice little indicator of where we're supposed to be going on this mission. Because I know sometimes it can be a little confusing when something of this scale we're just kind of roaming around aimlessly. So this feels pretty nice for the HUD. So this next section that we get into is sometimes that we team up with other mercenaries or other corporations. They have their own mecha or like armored core forces, and judging by this dialogue, you'll kind of hear the term red guns. I believe the term red guns means like those are designated armored cores or pilots that are assigned to different corporations. Like they're owned by that corporation and they fight for that corporation specifically.
Missions will see you partnered up.
And then, so this G5 Iguazu, he kind of mentions that he's annoyed that they have to work with a freelancer, the freelancer being us, an independent mercenary. And this, like, it sounds like this G5 and there's also G4 Volta. They're all from the same corporation. But they very clearly are not happy to be on a mission with us.
Wise guy who decided to language is taking care of some freelancing. Who gives a shit? We'll handle this mission ourselves.
So here we see another mention of the wall. G5 Iguazu says, well, us real red guns are going to go climb the wall. We still don't know what the wall actually means, but it seems like it's going to play an important role in the story of Armored Core 6. And then as some follow-up dialogue, he also says that this is just target practice. When we're done, the locals' little base is next. So I don't know if the locals are again the Rubicon Liberation Front, but the locals are the ones who have been living here after the cataclysm, and I have to wonder if at some point in the story we end up aligning ourselves with the locals instead. Okay, so in this section there wasn't really a whole lot that I noticed. It just seems like we're trying to approach the end of some sort of compound that's very heavily guarded by a bunch of turrets and like artillery fire. So we have to, before we can actually safely approach, we have to take out all these turrets. And then we get to this wall portion here, and we're met by another pilot named Sulla, and he seems to know Walter already because, well, this line right here. So he seems very familiar with Walter. He must have destroyed a lot of them. But let's quickly talk about what we see for Sula's loadout. So, um, first, this weapon in his left arm, I don't know what type of projectiles he's shooting, but it almost reminds me of that of Lucio from Overwatch. It seems like it fires out these like sound waves or like pulsar, like electrical pulses, and they don't do a ton of damage, but they build up impact damage pretty quickly if you get hit by the whole burst of them. And then he also has missiles that they're like the electric missiles that we saw in the gameplay trailer. They're, again, they don't do a ton of damage, but they build up impact damage pretty quickly. And lastly, this arm, his right arm weapon is a grenade launcher that does a ton of damage. So it seems like the functionality of his mech, or the game plan rather, is to build up impact quickly with these low damaging weapons, and then he kind of finishes off enemies with his rocket launcher, which deals a ton of upfront damage. One thing that I noticed in this scene here is everything looks standard from what we've seen up until this point. We don't really see any differences here. The one thing that is new that I didn't see anywhere else, I guess two things. One, there's this icon right here next to his health bar and stagger bar on like our center reticle. I don't know what this like what it actually means. Um yeah, I am not entirely sure. Um but the other thing is we know that his mech's name is Entangle, and we actually see his emblem up here as well, which looks like it could be like a snake in a knot or something like that. I can't quite tell. So here we see what those, I guess like the Lucio fires, those like EMPs look like. They're just like little balls of electrical energy, and when they connect, they build up a ton of stagger. Like, watch how quickly this builds up. It seems kind of insane. They're not doing a ton of damage to our mech, but man, it's a lot of stagger. So again, and then there was his rocket shot. It seems like our player dodged it with only taking a little bit of damage, but it did cause us to stagger, where we then take a ton of damage right there. So we've used one repair kit at one point in this fight already, so we have two left. And then we're able to finish off the Sulla, and I'm not sure if he was just a mini boss that leads into this boss right here, but this, from what I've heard in Vatty's video, this is the final boss of this level, or this stage, and we've seen him in the gameplay trailers before. This boss, it's primarily about dodging this barrage of rockets. It's like an insane amount of rockets, but he actually has a bunch of different weapon types I've found. So again, these rockets are you're gonna have to try to dodge them. You're not gonna be able to dodge every single one of them, but you should try to dodge at least the initial or like the mass flow of them. He also is equipped with 2 flamethrowers, which you will see have to be you'll have to dodge them in a more Souls-like manner. I'll talk about that in a little bit later. He also has a shotgun and a little bit of a other trick that I'll show in a moment. But I just stopped it here because he has an energy shield that we first have to break through. Let me rewind it a little bit. So this here. So I guess this is the secret that I was gonna say. If you get too close to him and he does this, it's like that EMP pulse that I was talking about earlier. If you're firing into this, it's actually blocking some of the projectile damage that's being done. So you can even see like there is a status effect that says shield as I'm not sure if you can actually read that. It says shield above or like below his health reticle here. So I assume that that's also mitigating some damage. The other thing, and we'll probably see it here in a little bit, if you are too close to him when that pulse goes off, it does a ton of damage, and it also will instantly stagger us, like instantly from 0 to full. Like right here, I think it happens in just a moment. Like our stagger, we are almost at like 0 stagger, and you can see like he's starting to build up the charge for that shield right now as the developer is charging in. So let's see what happens. Also, watch our health here. So being in range of that did 3,000 AP or damage to our AP, and it instantly caused us to stagger. And now we have to chew through that shield again. But going back a little bit to the flamethrower, so like here he's doing a horizontal attack that we have to jump over. So we're flying up in the air and we dodge it. But he has a few different variations of this attack. So, sorry, I'm trying to go frame by frame, but it's being a little laggy. So when he's in the air like this, he does a ground targeted flamethrower attack where he kind of like swings his arms onto a point, which is that point being us, and we have to, I assume, backdash out of it or go underneath him. Sorry. We have to go like to kind of get away from it somehow. But this attack here seems like it just shoots fire at the ground and it expands from the targeted point on the ground, almost like dragons or something from Elden Ring. And yeah, that did a ton of damage too. I assume in that case we are supposed to. So that did 5,000 damage to our AP just from getting hit by that one attack. So I assume that we are supposed to jump in that case. Like if we were to see him starting to charge this up and floating in the air like that, we're supposed to jump as well and try to avoid that. And there's just one tiny detail that I caught while at the end of this little trailer here. It shows some scenery and stuff like that. Nothing really too exciting. I just thought it was kind of cool, I guess. But there's this little like mining refiner tool thing. It almost reminded me of something like this here. It almost reminded me of something like like a Mako reactor from Final Fantasy VII. I wonder if this is like a coral miner or something like that, where they're trying to mine coral from the ground using this thing. I have no idea actually. It just seemed kind of unique considering they're doing this like panorama of it and stuff like that, and our mech is standing right in front of it. It seems like it's going to be relevant in some form. Anyhow, that's going to be it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of the new gameplay preview. Again, I will be doing a giveaway, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and follow the link in the description to sign up for the giveaway. And I have a bunch of other Armored Core content coming out in the future, so I really hope to see you in some of these future videos. But this was GooberTroy saying thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.